While you can have a destination in mind, you have to hold loosely to it and allow life to happen for you rather than you resisting because you are so steadfastly beholden to that which is in your mind as a commitment.
Welcome to the Shine Strategy Podcast, where entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business owners are getting visible and changing the world. I'm your host, Heather Burgett, an award-winning publicist, entrepreneur, and business mentor. Today's show is sponsored by PR Stars. For more inspiration and Shine strategies, head over to shineinsiders.com now for my free masterclass so that you too can get visible and go from local to global. Hey, Shine Insiders, it's time for shout outs. I wanted to just put a spotlight here on a couple of our amazing listeners, and I just want to thank you all for tuning in and listening and giving such great feedback, because this is what's fueling me and lighting me up, is knowing that I'm lighting you up. All right, let's see. We've got 5 stars here from Sharon Steiner Hart. She says, inspiring! Thank you for this, Heather. I am a huge fan of Nick's, and I was so inspired by the time you spent with him. I am so eager for the next episode. And I think that was for Nick Vallelonga's interview, our Oscar winner of Green Book, who was our first episode. But this also could be referring to Nick Vial, who we just had on. Either way, we've had 2 great Nicks. And thank you for listening, Sharon, and I'm glad you've been enjoying the conversations. We also have one here from Jody Costello, and she gives us 5 stars and says, Heather never hesitates to over-deliver and always strives to help others understand how to navigate the PR process so that we all can experience success in getting our message out to the world. She has created a community that is founded on engagement, learning, sharing, and encouragement. Love being a member of her group. Thank you so much, Jody. And I'm sure you are referring to the Shine Strategy Insiders group on Facebook, and you all are welcome to join us over there. All right, everyone, let's dig in. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We have a wonderful guest. I'm so excited to introduce to you Darrah Brustein. She is an impressive teacher, connector, entrepreneur. She's been named #1 to follow by Boss Babe magazine. For the past 10 years, she's founded and scaled 2 businesses in tandem, a networking events company serving 30,000 plus people, and a payment processing company spanning 38 states. Darrah's thought leadership articles on lifestyle design have been read by over 1 million people across Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Thrive Global. And most recently, she launched the video series, Diving Deep with Deepak and Darrah. And that's with the venerable Deepak Chopra. So with all that being said, welcome, Darrah.
Thank you, Heather. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining us today. And we connected in kind of an interesting way. So I thought it might be fun to start there for our listeners, because I know that a lot of what you talk about is connection and the importance of that, and also how it's done. I found you, I think, one of your articles from Forbes on top female hosted podcast that was posted on Kathy Heller's Instagram. And I blindly reached out to you. I was so inspired by what I saw out in the world on you out there in the online universe. And asked if you would be on the show. And I know that you have certain processes that you use to decide on what you'll do or not do. And can you tell us a little bit about that? And, what's important when you say yes to an ask?
Well, it's interesting. I think as a whole, I definitely create boundaries around my time and make sure that what I say yes and no to is aligned with the impact I'm trying to make and the work that I'm doing to move the needle there. So when it comes to something like this, it's sort of in hybrid. Like when you reached out to me, I had just come off of doing a 50 podcast tour, which I did in about 60 days. So I was a little bit burnt out on podcasts, but I think that really the undercurrent to your question is that I do most things instinctively and through gut checks. And so when you wrote, it felt sincere and it felt like you were genuinely interested in me and my work. It didn't feel canned or like you just spammed 100 different people. And you just seemed like someone that I would enjoy connecting with. And so I felt like the ask was worth the lift, meaning you asked for 30 minutes, which isn't a huge deal. And I really liked the work that you were doing. And so it felt aligned and worth saying yes to. And usually that's just like the basic framework for me.
I love that. And wow, that's a lot of podcasts in a short amount of time. So now I'm even more excited that you're here with us today, because I can imagine that would get a little exhausting. So thank you for taking the time to be with us and letting the listeners know that, it is so important about how you approach people and how you ask. And that when you do come from a place of authenticity, that really does make a difference.
Interestingly, I know your work is so central in the PR space, and you mentioned so generously in your introduction about the work that I do as a writer. And one of the things that I always try to tell people is that we all have desires and wants and needs in this world, but that approach is so critical. It's no different than if you're dating and you go up to a bar and how do you use your pickup line? Like, what do you say to someone, which is probably an outdated metaphor because everyone's on dating apps. But it's no different in the professional space where you need to approach someone in a way that they're actually going to want to respond to you. And when it comes to the space of press, I would say on a daily basis, I probably get 5 to 10 cold solicitations, either through Instagram or LinkedIn or email, where someone just pops into my inbox unsolicited and asks me to feature them. And I understand that that's how PR works. But I also understand that as the recipient of that, it feels really transactional, and it feels like I am not being valued as a person who has to put a lot of heart, soul, and time into what I would create as the output for that person to make an article and do an interview and do the research to create it in the first place. So to your point, I think it's really valuable for anyone who's considering creating a platform or wanting to put themselves out there and then needing to collaborate with people who have spaces and platforms that are going to help elevate their message, whether that be a podcaster like yourself or a writer for Forbes like me or anything in between, that it is so critical to approach someone in a way that you would actually answer and isn't transactional and one-sided, so that the person sees what's the value here and how can I connect with you as a human before we're going to do whatever this thing is that you're asking of me.
Yeah, and I love that you're pointing that out, because that's something I often talk to my clients or members about, that, in terms of working with people, helping business owners get their own PR and teaching them what it takes to actually get the results. And it is so much about taking the time to do your research and customization. And that's for anything in life. But in particular, when we're talking about PR and, say, approaching a Forbes writer like yourself and taking the time to have read some of your other articles, to see what it is that lights you up and you like to write about, and customizing the approach so that it's something that actually has value to you and your readers, and instead of just being a generic cut and paste kind of a situation. So yeah, that's good to hear your perspective on that. And I would love to also hear a little bit. I heard you tell one story where you said you got the best pass or decline response from Brene Brown. Can you share that approach with us?
See, this is you modeling what you're preaching, which is that you did your homework. So thank you. Yeah. So a couple years ago, I accidentally started a movement called Give It Forward. And it was centered on something that I think is really important as the foundation of this whole conversation, which is just this basic idea that people in the world access the success that they're seeking through connections and relationships, but they so often get it wrong, much like we were talking about, where they look at it from a what can I get, not what can I give perspective. So as someone who is naturally a giver, and I'm using now the language of Adam Grant, of the idea of these frameworks of give, match, or takers in the world. And if you haven't read Adam's book called Give and Take, it's a really great framework that gives science and evidence to what I'm going to anecdotally tell you. But so basically, I was the type of person who would always go out and develop relationships with this lens of curiosity and this lens of how can I help you get closer to your goals with no strings attached. So I made a commitment to myself several times over in the course of a year to say, I'm going to take 30-day periods, one at a time, where during this time frame, I'm going to reach out to one person a day and proactively, not passively, offer to be a resource to them in some way with no strings attached. And it turned into this thing that was so life-giving and so deepening of relationships, and made me so much more aware of how much value I had to offer that I was really taking for granted, and how much that could really help move the needle for other people, that I decided to put it out to my network. This was about 2 years ago, and say, hey, I have this Give It Forward thing. Does anyone want to ride alongside me and do it for 30 days and we can share our stories? And within 24 hours, I had several hundred people sign up, and we created a private Facebook group and shared our ups and downs and struggles and shared what the asks were from people in case we could help each other. And it was this really beautiful situation. And I remember hearing an interview Brene Brown had done at the time. And some of the research she had talked about in it really aligned with this work that I was doing, which really was just this volunteer thing to help spark more joy and generosity amongst people. And it was all about just giving it forward at the end of the day. It wasn't about what was in it for you, even though obviously, like every great thing in life, there's a really great positive byproduct for the giver. And so I reached out to Brene and just explained what was going on and said, I feel like this is something that might be right in your wheelhouse. And I ended up getting a response that I published in Forbes because I thought it was so beautifully done. And it wasn't from Brene specifically, it was from a member of her team. And the basic framework of the response I thought was worth mimicking. And so I published how to say no based on this response. And it was something along the lines of a first sentence that really highlighted what I was doing and made it clear that they had read my message. Then secondarily said, it's not a fit for Brene right now because, and they highlighted the 3 things that she was spending the majority of her time on currently, like her research, her teaching, and her family. And then it concluded with something that kept the door open and still felt nice, but made it very clear that it wasn't an option. And basically said something like, we wish you all the best with your Give It Forward movement. Keep, like, I don't even remember. It was published. But basically, I walked away feeling like, okay, I feel very clear that this is not a fit for Brene. I feel very respectful of her boundaries because her priorities are not aligned. And I feel seen and respected. And I actually got an answer, which I think is important too, because it's really easy to ignore emails. But it's, I think, really nice when someone comes to you with sincerity that you give that back to them. And so I just think as a whole, it provided this really great archetype of how we can treat each other with kindness, even when we want to say no.
That's so beautiful. And as someone who has been in PR for a very long time, we get a lot of no's and passes. And of course, they can't probably take the time to, structure a long response. Like, it sounds like that was a very thoughtful response. And I can just say that it would be so nice to get more of those kinds of no's than the just pass or no or take me off your list kind of responses that we so often get. But that's where we, in doing this kind of work, we really have to not take things personally and know it's about persistence and consistency, and just know that press people are being bombarded on a daily basis with unsolicited emails.
Putting yourself in their shoes and really being considerate of how would I want to be treated in this situation, and saying, like, how would I respond to this email myself? But to your point about the nice framed email, what I do is I create templates. That I use a tool called Mixmax, Mixmax, that you can use the free version of, and it's super robust. And one of its many great things that it does is that it has email templates that can sit in the drop down of the top right corner of your inbox if you use Gmail to plug in. And it allows you to have these templates. So I have a no template among many other ones that I can just drop into my email, adjust it based on the circumstance, personalize it, and move on.
That is a great tip. I think we scheduled through Mixmax, and I was like, what is this amazing thing, Mixmax?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I have no affiliation with Mixmax, but I really believe that it's a great tool. And the calendaring, I think, is awesome. The boomerang feature of emails, so that it helps you with keeping up with people and you don't lose track of correspondence. There's just so many things that really help you move relationships along.
Yeah, I love that the calendar was embedded into the email, and I could just select. You were like, here a couple times, pick one, and it was just so easy. So Great tip. Thank you for that one. Okay, so, something I really want to talk with you about, because it's definitely your wheelhouse, is connection. One of my favorite books from many years ago was Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, and he talks about 3 types of people: connectors, mavens, and salespeople. Now, you have done so much with the power of networking. You've hosted events. Sounds like you are doing these on a regular basis. Can you speak to how that has helped you grow your career, your income, your impact, your influence?
Yeah, I mean, for me, being a convener has been one of the most influential and important underpinnings of everything else I've created. So when I started my first company a decade ago with my twin, we started a credit card processing company. And I grew the business 100% through word of mouth referral-based marketing. And I did that by building relationships and then deciding to put myself as the epicenter of a community by starting my own networking event series that turned into this 30,000 plus multi-US city organization. Yeah, so by bringing all of these folks together and helping them spark these fruitful relationships where they're growing both professional and personal relationships, I think that's an important asterisk for me to highlight, that I don't believe that relationships are really that separable. I think we are one holistic person. And actually, I think social media has helped to bring this to the forefront more, that we don't have to live in these silos of here's my professional hat and here's my personal hat, and the two shall never mix. I love actually that you can be your whole authentic self in every environment now. And being the host of an event or ongoing networking series like I've created, I think was the perfect demonstration of that you can come up, you can make it whatever type of audience niche that you're looking to target or market in your primary business. If you so choose, you can totally be yourself and help draw connections together for other people. And there are all these like positive byproducts that I didn't anticipate by doing it. One, I started making a side income of over 6 figures, doing it about 10 hours a week or so on average. I became this person who was really sort of this epicenter in my community. I'm based in Atlanta because the event I started became the largest organization for young professionals in our city, and then in others as well. But I became this person that people knew if I need something or I need a connection or I want to meet new people or expand my network, I need to go to Darrah. I need to go to Darrah's event. And it made it so that my reputation preceded me, which I think is so fundamental to your message, Heather, that you need to find ways to build platforms where people are seeking you out and they know who you are and they know of you positively, rather than you always having to do the legwork to go see them. Another benefit was that this became a place where I could integrate all of my relationships that I wanted to connect with into one place. So one of the things that we all know that we have a limited amount of is our time and our energy. And they're both two things that you have to be really fastidious around. And when it comes to hosting networking events, it was this incredible place for me to say, let me invite my referral partners, let me invite my friends, let me invite my clients, let me invite prospective clients, let me invite your friends of friends of friends. And it became this place where I could connect and tap into all of these different moments and conversations with so many people, and then add additional value by connecting them to each other. So my impact in the community increased, my influence in the community increased, and so did my income, all pouring back into my primary credit card processing business initially. And then as I grew my companies over time, additionally poured into those. So I just found it as this like phenomenal triple win.
Amazing. And it feeds into each other and supports each other in terms of all of your different platforms and businesses that you're doing. So that's really exciting to hear about. And are the events still happening?
They are, yeah.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. How can people find out more about that?
So we operate the Under 40 events in Baltimore, Nashville, and Atlanta. And you can just head to networkunder40, the number is 40.com.
Wonderful. I'm sure you'll get some people joining you from hearing this. So thank you for sharing that. And something else I would love to chat with you about is this whole concept of lifestyle design. And I've heard you talk about living by intention and flow versus, say, like the hustle, kill yourself, working all hours, 7 days a week kind of attitude or approach, more like the Gary Vee type of approach. And he is someone who I think really gives an amazing reality check for what it takes to be an entrepreneur and have a business. But at the same time, I don't fully subscribe to his sort of, approach on really having to kill yourself in a lot of ways to make it successful. So can you speak to this a little bit in terms of what your approach is?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like, similar to you, I respect Gary Vee. I really don't respect this sort of cultural phenomenon that's been created around busyness as a badge of honor, and that we should all hustle, grind, and burn out in order to be successful. Whereas the way that I see it is that you are ultimately successful based on your own definition of that. And that when we continue to chase success by other people's definition or by the path that's well worn for us, we are ultimately chasing something that isn't actually aligned. And maybe you're someone who is the unicorn and you happen to love that and it energizes you and it's exactly where you need to be. But I think for most of us, that's not true. That we really hope to build lives and careers that are elevated and that we can feel fulfilled in, and that we feel like we're expressing our deepest gifts and that we can make an impact in the world. But what I think culturally we're often being inundated with is this idea that sleep when you're dead and check all the boxes, and happiness happens at this later destination of whenever we get to those milestones and mile markers, we realize don't actually fulfill us. So something I did when I was, maybe 5 or so years into growing my first company, and I was 1000% burnt out. I had completely abandoned everything I said that mattered and valued to me in exchange for more revenue, more of a footprint in how many states we were in, of just trying to hit these benchmarks that actually didn't matter to me. So I finally stopped and I thought, what does success look like to me? And I realized for me, it was about freedom of how I spent my time. It was about allowing my gifts to be fully expressed in the world and helping other people move along in their journeys and connecting the dots for them, both of people to people and people to resources to better the outcomes for all of them. And it was about actually enjoying the ride rather than waiting for some destination that I may or may not ever get to. And with that, I really just began to make a tremendous shift in the way that I worked and the way that I approached life. And I didn't make a giant leap, but I started tippy-toeing my way into some of my hypotheses around, well, if I say that I want to travel 50% of the time, but I'm glued to my desk and my computer, then I need to start experimenting with seeing, can my business sustain it if I start to travel? Or if I say that I value relationships and my friendships, but I'm actually not investing in them because I'm spending so much time working, what would it look like if I started investing in those relationships more? And the more that I started pressing into those, the more I realized that actually the counterintuitive approach was working, that the less I worked and the more that I poured into myself in other ways that helped me thrive, the better my business actually did and the better I felt as an outcome. And I was suddenly able to find all this extra capacity to live the life that I truly wanted to live and reverse engineer my business to support it and kick off the income that I needed rather than making my business my life.
I love how you're talking about that because I think that is such a common trap that business owners fall into, is that the business really starts to become all consuming. And when so many people start it to have that freedom, they don't end up having that freedom. They end up being sort of chained to their desk, so to speak. So can you give us any tips or insight into what are things that other people can do to start getting out of that cycle?
Well, the first is just the pausing and the stopping, which sounds so simple, but it really is hard when you're in that hamster wheel. And it's stopping and reconnecting with your own inner guidance. Some people would call this intuition, others might pray, whatever that is for you, to stop and tune in and figure out, how do I truly feel about the way I'm spending my time? And if today were my last day, would I be proud and happy of what I'm putting it into? Or even to project themselves forward to do a grotesque sounding but important deathbed exercise to say, when I look back on my life, what do I hope to say? And are my actions aligned with that today? And if not, how do I start to shift them? I consult with some clients on this. I did one yesterday. And what we did is we started with a guided visualization that really helped bring her to the idea of what is the life that I want to be living and what comes to fruition as what is most important and valuable. And then we took it back out and we wrote out, if we could vision based on what you were dreaming of, what your 10 years from now looks like. And then this is, I think, the really important key is to then assign dollar values to what this dream life looks like and annualize it and then make that bi-monthly, before or after taxes, just be aware of what that looks like. And this then gives you the number that becomes the North Star that then your career or your business needs to kick off that amount of income for you to live your dream life, rather than constantly pursuing this kind of amorphous idea of, oh, it must be 1 million or 10 million or 50 million, or just making up some number to feel like, well, I guess that's what my dream life would need to cost. When really, when I did this for the first time, I was 23 years old and I was looking out to 33. I'm now 35. And at the time when I thought, okay, my dream life 10 years from now, I found out that it cost 120,000 US dollars, which when I was 23 years old, that felt enormous. I was making $37,000 a year in the fashion industry. However, I realized that that wasn't some completely impossible number for me to attain. And that 2 years later, when I started my credit card processing company, I was able to say, okay, our average customer is worth $40 a month. How many of those do I need to bring on? And that's a residual based business. So that is also super nice. But to say, to make the $10,000 a month that I need to make to live this life. And it gave me a really strategic plan to put in place and figure out, what do we need to sell and how often, and how do we structure our sales and biz dev process to get there, rather than getting stuck in this fable that more is always better and bigger is always better.
That's so cool. And something else that I heard you talk about was that one of your goals for this year was to have less goals. So it's so important to have something to be reaching for, but can we talk a little bit about the balance?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm the type who is extraordinarily type A. I thrive on checklists and on having things to accomplish and finish and feel really energized by that. And I think, like anything, there's a polarity and a dichotomy where just because something can be good, too much of a good thing can also become bad. So for me, with goal setting, at the beginning of every year, I would diligently spend a handful of days going back and reflecting on the past year. My birthday is in November, so I would typically take a week or so in November to go back and reflect on the year and write about it and put it out publicly, both as accountability for myself as well as a time capsule and to help inspire and motivate other people. But then that would give me a foundation from which to go into the new year and say, okay, what happened this year? What do I feel good of? What do I want to build more? What do I dream of and visualize for the next year? And I would take this painstaking process to write out my goals, narrate them, create mantras that were adjectives for how I wanted to feel throughout the year, and then create a vision board. And for years, it really served me well. But I decided this year that instead of doing that, I was going to live more in a place of flow where I was going to be more considerate about just saying yes to what felt exciting and aligned, saying no to what didn't, and being open to letting opportunities evolve as they needed to. And literally, right when I made this decision, days later, Deepak Chopra and I were emailing, and he asked me if I would do this video series with him that you alluded to in the introduction. And this wasn't even on my radar. Like, if you had asked me in 2019, do you want to have a video series, let alone do you want to have a video series with Deepak Chopra every week? I would have been like, oh, that's hilarious. And it was exactly this moment of clarity and this moment of confirmation that while you can have a destination in mind, you have to hold loosely to it and allow life to happen for you rather than you resisting because you are so steadfastly beholden to that which is in your mind as a commitment. And for me, I'm the type where when I put my mind to something, I will do it come hell or high water. So sometimes that worked to my detriment because I would say, well, I've committed to doing that, so I'm going to see it through, even though it no longer serves me and I hate doing it. So with something like this, I can still say, I know generally where I'm going and what I want to do, but I'm going to let the how of that unfold a little bit more gracefully.
That's beautiful. And it's that sort of, living with the intention, but also being in the flow because things do move and change. And what I've found to be one of the most important things in being an entrepreneur is being flexible and being able to shift and pivot. So I love that you're saying that. And I was reading Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans, where he talks to, pretty much every major entrepreneur that has ever existed. And I don't even remember which one it was, but one of the conversations was, if it's not a hell yeah, I'm not doing it. So, really being strong in what you want to be doing, what feels right, doing that gut check. And I just love this example as an affirmation that you were on this path and then look what showed up. And how has it been working with Deepak? Tell us a little bit more about that and how people can find your series.
Yeah, it's been incredible, honestly. And for anyone who might relate to this, I want to share this tidbit that one of the things I've always struggled with in my life and career is that good enough feeling of like, am I good enough? I've always lacked the confidence in that space. I remember very, very specific moments in my life where I just would walk into a room like the first day of college and feel like, how did I end up here? It's that basic imposter syndrome of I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, other people are doing it. All those voices wreak havoc in my mind. And I have learned many tools and strategies to really see the truth behind them and keep it moving in life so that they don't prevent me from progressing. However, when it came to Deepak, he really gave me a gift that he didn't realize he gave me until I later told him, which is what I call borrowed confidence. And what I mean by that is that he saw something in me that I did not see in myself, and I certainly didn't value in myself. And when he invited me to come alongside him and create this series, the Diving Deep with Deepak and Darrah, where we say we make the deep relatable and translatable, he asked me to come in because he said, my work is really esoteric, and I think that you can help me make it more relatable and translatable to people. And I just thought, there are billions of people on this planet, and you truly could have chosen any of them. And you're asking me to do this with you. And so I borrowed the confidence that he saw in me until I could believe it and see it in myself to really, truly own it. And for me, this is different than fake it till you make it, because I actually really don't like fake it till you make it, because I think it's so inauthentic. But this was about, let me borrow what you see in me so that I can ride those coattails until I can truly embody it, which is really different because sometimes we need people to help bring us to the next level when we're not quite ready for it. And that was really critical for me. And then honestly, too, to your initial question, to be saddled up alongside Deepak on a weekly basis and be in his text messages all the time and get to ask him any question I feel like and have him as this now friend and mentor is incredible. And to be able to then share that with the world, because we record all of our conversations, feels like such a gift that I can share with everyone else that I obviously get so much of the spoils of because I get front row seats to it. So it's been this incredible, incredible experience that I think the underlying thing that I want people to hear and know is I am no different than anyone who's listening to this. Deepak hadn't known me less than a year before he asked me to do it. I just was someone who practiced what I preached and went out in the world pursuing relationships the way that I did and pursuing giving back to the world in the way that I know your listeners do as well. And because of that, we created an actual friendship that turned into this opportunity. So I just hope that for anyone who feels like that can never be me and there's someone I really want to work with one day, or there's people I need to access to get to my goals, you can. You just have to be patient and play the long game and be generous and really build true, authentic relationships to get there and stay open. But actually, there's something that you said earlier that I want to really say something about really quickly, which is when you were talking about tools of Titans, you talked about the idea of if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And I think in some cases, this has gone too far. And I want to also dog ear this for the listeners, because there's a difference between saying yes to something that feels energizing and aligned, and then also turning away things because there's just hard work involved, or because there's a persistence that's required to get over the next hurdle. And I think that's professionalism, is saying yes to stuff that you know is in your and your audience's best interest, even if the day-to-day of it, every moment or for a season in time, doesn't feel like a hell yes, because every moment and every day doesn't have to feel at a 10. And I don't want people to get that message confused, that we all don't have to be living at this like epic, everything is amazing and exciting and it's a hell yes all the time, because that's not real and that's not true. And if we're chasing that high constantly, we're missing out on the real stuff of life, and we're not learning to work within the reality that life also requires other pieces of ourselves, like dedication, persistence, commitment, things like that.
That's a really great point. And I think another piece to that too is that a lot of times, and just I know working with so many people over the years and getting visible, stepping into the mainstream spotlight, there are a lot of things that come up, a lot of limiting beliefs, self-doubts, and we have to do a lot of mindset work and, spiritual alignment shifts in those times, because people will come up with all sorts of excuses and reasons not to do something. So we really look at well, what are the reasons behind that? Like if it's truly not in alignment with you, that's one thing. But if it is in alignment with your ultimate goals, but you're allowing yourself to somewhat sabotage yourself by saying no, it's really important to make sure that people are clear with why they're doing or not doing something. So thank you so much for pointing that out. And I love that you're talking all about this visibility, because obviously that's a lot of what this show is about, and how Deepak came to you and found you. And it's so important to have this, digital footprint, this presence in this day and age, so that the people that can hire you or want to collaborate or partner with you can find you. So, in terms of the Forbes writing, and being out there with such a high profile platform, would you say that you feel that this has contributed as well to your success?
1,000%.
I love it.
It's that is an actual hell yes.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah. And that's, so much of what we're talking about in my community is what comes up when people Google you or when they search for something that you're related to. One of our recent episodes was with Stacey Jones, who she was discovered as a product placement expert for film and TV. And when the whole Game of Thrones Starbucks cup incident happened, where the cup appeared in the show, the reporters found her when they Googled and searched, and she came up. And so she ended up getting, I think ended up being $68 million in media value for commenting on the story. Yeah. So it's the power of this stuff is no joke, getting out there, having a presence online, and being searchable and discoverable by the people that, you're meant to work with. I'd love to ask you, if there were a version of yourself that were younger, if you could go back in time and give that person advice, how old would you be and what would you say?
I'd probably be 22. So I just graduated from college and I was watching all my friends go off into often six-figure jobs straight out with these clear delineated paths or going off to graduate school. And I felt totally lost. And I felt so insecure. And I felt like everyone was lapping me in life and I was super directionless. And I really wish that I had told myself to be my own biggest cheerleader, which is sort of ironic because I was a cheerleader. And to tell myself that really, like, you have to be the hero of your own story and that no one's going to come along and be this knight in shining armor to save you professionally or otherwise. And that everything will work out. And that the more that you resist, the more you're causing undue and unneeded stress and drama for yourself. Whereas the more that you allow the path to guide you, the more that things will work out in your favor.
That's beautiful. I love that. And out of all of the projects that you're working on now, what would you say is lighting you up the most?
I feel really excited about the course I created that actually is the exact alignment with what I was sharing about the networking event series, that after spending 8 years growing Network Under 40 and Network Over 40 into 30 plus thousand people company, I decided to start teaching through an evergreen course how other people can increase their income, impact, and influence by hosting their own networking events for their own audience in their own market under their own brand. And that's been really exciting because, like I talked about, it gives people this platform to do those three things and have a great time creating this profitable side hustle. So if anyone's looking for that, you can just hop over to my website. It's darrah.co, darrah.co/programs, and check it out there.
Beautiful. And what's the best place to find your video series with Deepak?
That's also at darrah.co, and you can just do darrah.co/diving deep.
I just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. You're such an inspiration, and you're really, truly living the entrepreneurial dream and setting a wonderful example for so many people out there in doing it from a grounded and spiritually aligned place that doesn't sacrifice your health and well-being as you're doing it. So thank you for being that shining and guiding light for all of us. And do you have any last thoughts for our listeners today?
Just keep putting in the work, but making sure that you're not snuffing out that inner voice. Like, take the time every day to do something outside of your work that makes you feel connected to yourself and that which truly lights you up. And that will be the thing that keeps you energized to keep doing the good work that you're doing.
I love it. Thank you so much, Darrah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the Shine Strategy Podcast. I invite you to join me at shineinsiders.com for a free masterclass where you can get more inspiration and strategies to get visible and change the world. Your voice matters. Please subscribe, rate, and share this show so we can continue to grow on this journey together. Until the next one, it's Heather Burgett, your Shine Strategist, signing off.